people who are close to the child, like the teacher or the educator in the system, and we observe how their language is developing. And that has really shown a major improvement as well for families who go through our program. So we saw significant increases in areas like sentence repetition and story comprehension, which are kind of the basic early numeracy and early literacy areas that you would want to look at.
Hello and a very warm welcome to a very special podcast, Unusual Suspects. I'm your host, Gaurav Chaudhary. This is a series about unraveling stories of entrepreneurs, investors, and businesses, and of course, professionals who are disruptors, yet not in your face. The disruptions have consistently delivered on the purpose and the mission they've embarked on. Their values are as strong as the mission. While they're ruthless in pursuing their ambition, they don't stray from being leaders who are not just admired for the vision and relentless pursuit, but also for how they're building an ecosystem of believers who consistently push the boundaries. In each episode, I speak to one such leader, talking to her or him or them about their businesses, lives, inspirations, interests, challenges, pivot moments and turning points, successes, failures, agonies and ecstasies, and of course, the little joys of life and work. Unusual Suspect streams on Earshot.in, Spotify.com, Apple Podcasts, YT Music, MoneyControl.com, and a host of other podcast streaming platforms. For this episode, I'm delighted to have Sneha Sheth, CEO and co-founder, Dost Education. Dost Education is innovating to get every child school ready in India. By putting parents at the center of early childhood development, our vision is to unlock every child's full potential regardless of where they were born. Dost builds software, audio content, and toolkits that make it easy, fun, and addictive for parents of any literacy level to boost their child's early development through three proven mechanisms: talk, care, and play. The flagship product is Phonecasts, 1-minute daily podcasts delivered through a phone call that solve everyday parent problems and nudge them to turn regular moments into talk, care, and play moments. The content is for parents with kids aged from birth to 6 and covers nonviolent parenting, cognitive development, socio-emotional skills, and school preparedness, among others. Welcome to Unusual Suspects, Sneha. Delighted to have you on the show.
Thank you, Gaurav. It's so nice to chat with you, and I'm excited to get into it.
Right. Let me start off with a basic question, but fundamental nonetheless. In India, there are about 150 million motivated parents who are low income, low literate, and they, of course, want a better life for their children because education is a gateway to success, and I don't think that needs no emphasis. What is the problem that you are solving for this class of parents, Neha?
Yeah, so Gaurav, when we started working with Dost and we started the organization, our problem that we identified was that children and parents really want and are aspiring for better, right? And if you've been born as a low literacy parent, you feel the burden of your child not being the same as you in terms of literacy, in terms of opportunities, in terms of access to education and achievement. You feel that burden so much more, right? Because you're so aware that you haven't had that opportunity. So the problem we saw was that families who feel this gap the most intensely had no one creating any kind of unique solutions for them. We noticed that nobody was designing for them in the same way that we might design, an amazing user experience, like, using an Uber or using, I'm thinking of other, like shopping on Amazon or Flipkart. So why can't a parent who's from a low income community, who definitely wants their child to have an amazing life, an amazing shot at life, why can't they have an incredible product designed for them that has a joyful user experience, that's easy to use, and that makes it possible for them to support their child's learning at home during those early years, which are very critical? So Gaurav, that's really why and why we started, because of this problem and this key kind of human insight that we saw.
Absolutely. Now, Sneha, just to understand what triggered this idea, because this is a space that, if I may use the word, not very glamorous for startups, particularly if it's a Y Combinator funded startup or a supported startup. And what we get to hear is in the world, the most successful startups are those in the technology space of a very different kind. However, this is a very unique space because you're focusing on children and in the age group of 0 to 6 for problem solving problems of learning, foundational learning and numeracy, if I may say so. Why did you choose this space now?
Yeah, so to me personally, and my co-founder Sindhuja, there was nothing more glamorous than creating impact and changing the lives of families in one generation. So to us, it felt like so cool to be able to address the root cause of so many other challenges we see, and the cycle of poverty and illiteracy all begins when a child is in that 0 to 6 age range. Why? It's because when a child is born, in those first 5 to 6 years, their neural connections are being they're like rapidly firing, right? So they say 1 million neural connections each second. That's really when 90% of the brain forms. And so if we can get to kids during that time and address some of the root causes of the latter issues we see, like half of kids can't read a sentence, or 50% of kids cannot read at their level by the time they graduate from grade school. These are all issues that we can actually start working on early when the brain is forming and developing those initial connections. So we thought this was like the coolest thing, because we can use this unique moment in the child's life to intervene. We can use technology because it's now being widely available in the hands of low-income families. And we can combine a lot of our insights on community development and what families needed and how education works during the early years with a technology platform that's easy and accessible. So I felt like that was what was exciting to us. And we didn't set out to be, a cool startup. We just set out to make impact on something that we felt really intrigued and interested and passionate about. And it happened to be that we're so fortunate in 2017, after my co-founder and I graduated from UC Berkeley with our masters, we were so fortunate that Y Combinator, as you mentioned, there were others as well, the Malago Foundation, Fast Forward. We were super lucky that in those first span of couple of years for us, these organizations saw the gap that we saw. They resonated with the idea and said, we know there's not a clear model for financial sustainability yet, right? Because our user is a low-income family. However, we see the power in the impact, and we see the power and potential in your model of using low-touch technology. And they believed in us back then, and because of them today, and because of the incredible team we have, we've been able to reach over 500,000 children, and we have started establishing very kind of more official agreements with states as well, who are equally invested in solving this mission for their communities. So Gaurav, that's a little bit why maybe it wasn't glamorous to everyone else, but I think to those of us doing the work, it felt like the right and the most exciting and important place to be. And it still does.
Absolutely. You're working in India, and what has been the learning so far? Yeah. I ask you this question because it's also important to find out what kind of impact you are creating or your solutions have brought about for parents who are using these solutions for the literacy, for the education of their own children. It is a very cost-effective, technology-enabled solution that you are providing. How are you measuring impact? And related to that is that what are the key challenges that you encountered, which probably you did not anticipate when you started off? Sneha?
Yes, sure. So I'll just set a little context. I began this work with my co-founder. Both of us are Indian. I'm kind of more of a global citizen where I grew up in many different countries. But our team is dedicated and comes from India, and we've experienced these challenges ourselves, which is where the kind of inspiration came from. Now, the way we measure impact is really important to us because this isn't like a money-making enterprise. This is a nonprofit startup. So how do we make sure the bottom line is actually being achieved when it's not a financial one? We took a pretty business approach to this, right? So we said, first, are people using our product? Like if they're not using it, absolutely nothing can happen. We began to be able to test and monitor and track that data on dashboards, just like any business would. And we learned from that about 60% of parents who sign up for our program become highly engaged users. So for a kind of a tech platform, an audio-based kind of parenting support program, this was a very, comparatively high engagement. Most people, think of an app you sign up for, like a daily meditation app. Most people would not follow through with that over a 9-month period, which is what our initial program is. So 60% of families really get through this program and want to use it every day. And it helps them with increasing their confidence as parents and their knowledge on how to handle their child's behavior. So we did a study where we saw that 91% of parents are more confident versus 77% of parents in a control group who did not go through our program. Similarly, we saw 94% of parents have more knowledge on handling their child's behavior, particularly problematic behaviors that might then lead to violent punishment or challenging situations at home. And that 94% was compared to a 77% of parents in the control group who did not receive our program. But I will say that in the last year, our thinking has really evolved, even beyond this level of impact. So even though parents are gaining confidence, knowledge, they're gaining access to talk, care, and play activities in ways that they have never accessed ever before, we felt like it was important to push one step further and design something that actually helps kids learn better right away in a short period of time. And so some of the innovation we've been working on, and I can talk a little more about it, has really been around improving language development for the child. And the way we measure that is really by working closely with researchers and people who are close to the child, like the teacher or the kind of educator in the system. And we observe how their language is developing. And that has really shown a major improvement as well for families who go through our program. So we saw significant increases in areas like sentence repetition and story comprehension, which are kind of the basic early numeracy and early literacy areas that you would want to look at.
Absolutely. We are also in India in the middle of rolling out the NEP, the new education policy of 2019, and it has started rolling out. So it's being rolled out in a staggered manner. And some of these clearly align with the kind of problems that you were trying to solve. To what extent the new education policy actually aligns with your own goals, Sneha?
Yes, it's been really exciting to see the NEP momentum, right? When we began in 2017, it was a really small kind of landscape, and government policy had not yet set such a strong mandate as we saw in 2019 and the rollout from there on. So we were, I think, already working on some of the exact concepts that you see coming out with Adarshila and Navjitna, right? These different types of clear activities that parents can do to stimulate brain development, cognition, social emotional learning. These were the crux of some of our early work. As an example, we would provide one activity that asked moms and dads that were making rotis for dinner. We said, change the size and the shape of them as a way to kind of surprise your child and also get them to see the difference between a big roti and a small roti. This was through a kind of story-based game where there were different sized animals and the child could assign, which did the hathi get the big roti and did the mouse get the small roti. So these were things we were doing, which now the policy is actually bringing about very clearly. And so our mission is very aligned with these policies, and it's been very heartening, and the compassion and I think commitment from the different state partners that we work with is really, really incredible to see. And so I think the timing has been really great, and we're seeing some exciting things happen. Of course, we have a long way to go in implementing the policies, as with anything, right? So, there's still certain challenges, and I can talk more about those, but the momentum is there, the intention is there, and now even the implementation has begun.
Sneha, play is the center of your mission, and globally, UNICEF and LEGO have declared June 11th as the International Day of Play. Also, both UNICEF and LEGO are both funding partners. How has this been adopted in India, the International Day of Play in India? And why did it take such a long time to be declared as a day? Because play is such an important part of learning, isn't it?
It sure is. I don't know why it took so long. I think that the research around play finally caught up with what most people inherently saw when they worked with young children, right? The research is now really proving what those of us who interact with children on a daily basis and play with them know that play is really a form of learning. It's a form of discovery. It's a form of, getting persistent at a task. It's a form of learning how to tolerate frustration, and so many more things, even beyond what I said. So I think it just took a while because the research finally caught up and really proved unequivocally how different kinds of play result in different types of learning and great outcomes for children in the long run. I'm really excited about how it's an International Day of Play now. I think our team tries to be as playful as we can as adults with responsibilities. And we had a chance to celebrate the first International Day of Play on June 11th with some other partners who are also really in this work that Dost Education is doing. So we partnered with organizations actually globally. So we had Lively Minds from the African continent. We had Quest Alliance, Rocket Learning from our, Indian and Asian continent. So it was a really nice collaboration, and it was great to see different organizations coming together to share why they think play is so important, right? And how play can really become the crux of the success of early childhood development policies and interventions.
Absolutely. Sneha, the thing is also about, and it's always true about any startup idea, is about scalability. And you're in an area where scalability probably will remain a challenge because it's not just about technology alone. It is also about actually, changing learning outcomes and trying to solve complex problems of parenting. India is such a diverse country. How do you ensure that your solutions actually scale rapidly and also at the same time remain contextually relevant across regions? Because diversity in India is both an advantage and also can be a challenge if you're trying to solve complex problems, particularly linguistic and cultural diversity. Sneha?
Yes, Gaurav, that's true. And it isn't easy. And I think there are wonderful tools now, right? Like we can use AI, we can use different off-the-shelf open source tools that enable us to do some of this contextualization, translation, development faster and more cheaper than it has ever been before. Having said that, the type of work we do, the crux of it happens in the human connection between a caregiver and a child. And so Dost sees its role as increasing that human engagement, right? So I always joke about this with my team and with other people that if we could solve this problem with robots, we'd be in for like an easier ride. But the reality is that the way early childhood development happens is through engagement with actual grown-ups and people who care about you. There's something that we cannot change about that. At least we haven't figured that one out yet. And so what's important is that any use of technology and any scale strategies are rooted in that human engagement and that human connection. So what that means for us in India and what that means for us at Dost is that we have to balance it out and be hungry for impact. And what I mean is that, if you see information that's telling you that in the goal of scaling and reaching so many kids who urgently need help, which is true, right? We have 80 million children who probably could take advantage of a program or all the types of programs that support early childhood development today. But if we try to do it urgently without that human connection strengthened, then it would just be a waste of effort. And so I think we have to continuously be hungry for that impact, be self-critical, and make changes so that when we are putting in all those efforts to scale, and not just us, but our governments are putting in all those efforts to scale. Anganwadi workers are putting in all that effort to grow this and reach more families. We have to really make sure that what we're asking them to do is simple and actually effective. And I'll go one step further here, right? When Dost was in the last few years in this learning journey about how much impact can we make with a 1-minute daily phone cast, right? That's a good question to be asking. We were really pleased with how much impact we saw on the parents, but we were kind of not seeing any very tangible changes at the child level. And so before we scaled to 5 or 6 other states who were coming to us saying, please, let's partner and let's get work going here, we actually paused on those partnerships. And we said, just give us a little more time to get this right and get this to a deeper level of impact. Because if you're going to take on all the effort to do, localization, we call it we have to adapt everything, translation, and also adaptation to the context, train your Anganwadi workers or community frontline workers to learn about talk, care, and play and the programming. All of that operational work is intensive. So we actually, paused until we could make sure that we were getting it right in the places we were already in. And I think it's always a balance that each organization has to find for themselves between, scale and impact, especially if that's what you set out to do.
Sneha, technology, while is a great enabler and also empowers, in many cases, in many societies, it can also be a little intimidating because it has issues like literacy, and there are barriers. Literacy can be a massive barrier for adoption of technology, and also digital access. Say, for instance, you probably need a smartphone, you need a fair degree of internet bandwidth, etc. How have you been navigating these challenges in India, since your target audience and you're trying to reach caregivers of a certain socioeconomic class who probably will not have the resources to acquire technology and devices in the manner that would enable this kind of solutions to reach a certain degree of scale and efficiency. Sneha?
Yes, yes. And I'll add one more challenge into the mix, which is gender, right? Our gender and socioeconomic status tend to define our access to things like a smartphone. We know one of the Anganwadi worker Didis that we work with who has a smartphone because it's part of her job requirement, right? So when she's at work, when she's doing her task list, she has a smartphone for that. But when she goes home, she's not allowed to use her own smartphone. These are realities that we are still navigating. And so I think the way that Dost has approached it is we remembered our purpose, and our purpose was to reach the families who never had access to this kind of support before. And so our product is actually available on feature phones. There is a version that's free and available on feature phones. It does not require digital literacy other than being able to dial a phone number, which most families and women, particularly mothers and fathers, have that capability. And it's easy to access, right? Audio only. We are on smartphones as well, because that is a very media rich way to support families and demonstrate and practice what do these talk, care, play practices actually look like in real life. It's really helpful. I'll speak about myself as a mom. It wasn't until I saw someone else and another parent and child engaging in a certain activity, for example, how to read together and actually get the child to stay for a long time and be interested in the book. Observing other families do it is actually one of the best ways to figure out how to do it yourself. And so, WhatsApp is important because it allows us to do video, it allows us to do photos, it allows us to go into much more depth and personalization. So we are on WhatsApp, and we're going to meet families where they are at. In particular, we are going to meet mothers who tend to have the lowest access to the technology in the household, so that they can use any type of product that they can at that moment.
Finally, Sneha, if you had a wish list for early childhood education, ECE, what would that be? And also for early childhood development in India, what would that be, Sneha?
I have a long wish list. One of them is to think of caregiving and responsive caregiving, and give responsive caregiving the due that it deserves. And this is a global wish list, right? So it's not just for India, but it includes India. We have to showcase to Anganwadi workers, to moms and dads who are performing their caregiving duties, to grandparents, to siblings. They have to be feeling super charged that this is a role that they're taking on, and they have to be given tons of credit for it because it is not easy. So that's one thing, is giving caregiving and responsive caregiving the due, the power, the glamour that it deserves, as to your point that this is not necessarily a glamorous space from a startup point of view. Secondly, I think a wish list would be to kind of expand how we think of early childhood development beyond just a preschool setting or the home setting with a mother. Early childhood education happens when a father picks up their child from school and walks them home. Early childhood development happens when a grandmother cooks together with her child and shows them how to roll the dough or rotis. Early childhood development happens when you're caring for your child by helping them use the restroom and you're walking them through that experience, right? These are the basic ways that we are caregivers. And I think if we can kind of talk about it from a perspective of what can everyone in the family do, not just the preschool teacher or the mom, I think we'll have a much more rich environment for the child to grow up in, which is all we care about. And I think there's many more things I could say, but I'll wrap with saying that I really, really wish that every parent has access to support, because, even it doesn't matter what your income level is or your literacy level, you need support in this day and age to be a responsive caregiver.
Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you so much for taking the time out and dropping by to have this conversation with us. Thank you so much for sharing your deep insights and perspective. It was a delight to have you on the show.
Thanks, Gaurav. And before we wrap, I'd love to hear a little bit about if you've had a parenting journey and if you want to share anything on your wish list.
Well, in my parenting journey, of course, all of us come from what I call a bit of a privileged and entitled background. So things are a little easier for us compared to the rest. But I am at a personal level also involved in a bit of education over the last 2 decades or so. for underprivileged kids. And what I realize is that upward mobility of families is clearly a function of two things: good education and good health. If you can solve these problems for them, technology, of course, is going to be a big pillar of that, then I think a large part of the upward mobility problem that has remained a long-term challenge for a country like India will get solved. It needs many things to fall in place together: the policy and the regulatory environment, of course, the policy focus and priority. And I think now technology is going to probably rapidly help that scale to an extent that we can solve many of these problems.
Yes, that resonates with me. Thanks for sharing that.